Jill here with Sirius Stellus Moon, and we have Ascendant conjoining the galactic center, which is a great time to talk about worldly things. Midheaven is 12 degrees Libra, ruled by Venus, that's in the first house at 4 degrees Sag. Mercury is 22ing, and I've been excited about the ruler of the full moon, and now moon conjoining Sedna, being 22 in Scorpio. It's next to my Mars, and opposing my Lord of Spirit. And Mars is 21 degrees Sag, already in, Mars has ingressed to the decan of the galactic center, and it's the last decan of Sagittarius. And the way I look, if my previous video was about looking at the fixed star of a sign to tell us the important things to contain, and this is how I look at the galactic center as anything that crosses that decan, and how that decan in Sagittarius, and how mastering that decan in Sagittarius requires tending to the galactic center. It is also Mula Nakshatra. So I want to talk about how sexual sovereignty is so important and why so many things are founded on attempting to violate it and retapping to it. So when we talk about sexual sovereignty in spirit and in matter, basically we are also talking about the fact that there were actual physical rituals to try to mutilate the genitalia, to try to control the sexual energy. And unfortunately, those rituals still exist, both within the elite, indigenous, and monotheistic religions. And it is also a value that is at the foundation of wealth creation, truth, cohesion, and accessing of truth. Okay, so from the galactic center point of view, or how would the galactic center view the topic of sexual sovereignty, is basically every consciousness incarnates into this world through life and has life energy. That life energy, in cohesion with that consciousness, grows. Okay, speaking in Jupiter terms, the truth, the benevolence, the expansion of that consciousness grows naturally, unabashed. Attempting to interfere or trying to control that, bless you, by ritual, to harvest that, to feed on that, to sacrifice that, okay, is unsacred. And this was the attempt to bring, to control wealth that stems from lack of awareness of the benevolence of one's soul, the natural exponential expansions of one's life energy, wealth, truth, and legacy. I know I have my midheaven there, so I would see legacy. Other people would see children or partner, but it is innately sacred in the sense that even if in the most secular notion, that would be seen as the sexual sovereignty that we cannot violate if we want cohesion, truth, wealth, and freedom. Freedom, 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 freedom. in all that that entails, whether it's freedom in enjoying what you have, freedom in expansion and growth, freedom in financial freedom, freedom in um, uh, um, freedom of the soul. Another thing that comes to mind, and shout out to Albina in the privileged few. Um, so I have been meditating on the fact that I'm coming from a certain point of view, and Albina is coming from basically new money. Her channel is privileged few, and she's bridging the gap between classes through social media. So this is a very, very ambitious task, um, incredibly impressive, because it's bridging worlds that are so secluded. And being new money is being at the brink of that. It's being one generation apart from the generation that knows what it's like to work hard and make no meticulous wealth. And by the way, the grandchildren have the journey of the grandparents. Okay, so this is very interesting. If Albina would like to address that once, that would be very interesting to think about. As an astrologer, we know that I actually got it from Slavic astrologers that the journey of the grandchildren is continuation of the telos of the grandparents. So this is actually a very important wealth mark, because wealth is usually lost at the third or the fourth generation, and here we have wealth gained. With new money, it's exactly the opposite. Um, so and I was thinking of how the topic of sexual sovereignty is so important to bridge. Okay, from my point of view, and I was telling Albina that I came from asking myself, what would solve the problem of the rich so that I can use their wealth to subsidize solving the problems of the poor or those who don't yet have. And I was like, what if the problem of the rich is covering up what they did to the poor to get rich? But here is where a point of intervention, transmutation, and reinventing wealth and bridging the gap is coming in, and this is sexual sovereignty. Because the innate life energy of the infant, I don't know how much new money is acquainted with that, but for those that were born into elite lineages or clone lineages, we have ritual abuse survivors that were born into clone lineages. Um, I don't have Dutch, and that's a part of the country's ancestry, and so they were born, and their innate life energy, clone not clone, their innate life energy was basically harvested, and they were set out so that they would believe that they need to be predators and harvest the life energy of humanity and be predatory on humanity, and that's how they gain like the big wealth and big control. I'm talking about monarchy houses. I'm talking about um, the families that erect popes. Okay, so they would be brought into that belief, and they would base that belief on cloning, on rituals that they do to the genitals, on rituals that harvest the energy of infants, and not really reconnecting with their own essence of wealth. Now that Chiron is conjoining my Mercury with Aries, and the Chiron Aries conjunction, and this is where we see channels like Albina's channel, which is bridging the gap between the those societies, okay, and the common people that watch social media, okay, and which are usually not the same people. If I go even, you know, I'm half Dutch. Our prime minister was known to carry a Nokia, Okay, like not even go online. So you just think about the the fact that the seclusion gap of how a generation that is used to be secluded from, not have a profile, where power was invisibility, and a generation where visibility is tapping into one's power. Okay, one of the reasons I didn't change my picture to a clippy is not personal branding, but actually evidence of my existence in, okay, and okay, in the coming decade, I will have a Pluto squaring my Sun transit, and also my Saturn. So there'll probably be a topic I will delve into way more. It came up at my Pluto square as well. But you think about a politician or a public person at a juncture of decision making, where the visibility cannot be, okay, cannot be, it's a non-negotiable. Okay, we have to see who is the person that we vote, for example. Now, because of the mind control and the handlers and the extortion cults and the occult type, okay, then we don't. And this is, and not just because of lobbying, okay, it's also the occultism behind that. Um, and this is where, okay, this is where all these things come about, and and that lack of control, lack of visibility, is created innately by violation of sexual sovereignty. And then people get into, with a lot of torture, they get into the unconscious mindset. It's not the consciousness that they're targeting, but their unconscious belief, the unconscious belief that would dictate susceptibility to mind control, which is, if I don't steal, I don't have, including life energy, fertility, creative energy. And this is completely misguided, but because the violation was so innately embedded into the fabric of society, and it affects not only the elite, it affects the common people, people that were born into, okay, I'm not going to call it names because it's a very sensitive topic, but let's say significant age gap, so much so that the one of the parents could have been considered, or was, or is, a minor. And that happens not just in royalty lineages, okay, and how that affects the challenge that requires tapping into one's innate, sovereignty. It's tapping into sexual sovereignty. It's tapping into, it's abolishing any rapey timelines. And rapey is not, rapey is also when one, I'm sorry, self pleasures, if they are ready or not for their own, okay, energy. For a lot of people that were around certain societies, or even my job line exposed me to basically, doing astrology timelines where even our own body, even when we talk about showering, washing our hands, touching ourselves, is not always only our own consciousness. Now, I cannot say that the collective consciousness doesn't have benefits, okay? It is a community, it's a sense of belonging, it's connection, it's, somebody uploads a video and they're in my mind, or somebody does something and I dream. It's a very important sense of communion. It also comes about with the malleability that we all need to tend to, as community, to both share that union, and and sexual sovereignty is the number one thing that can bridge, that can, because we will be sitting with the people that were supposed to be the expendable children, the people that were raised to believe that they need to harvest on the energy of those expendable children, the women that left domestic violence and thought, well, who would Who suffers also from assassination attempts? Oh, activists, journalists, politicians. Okay, let's see, what can we commonly do? Oh, wait a second. Oh, wait a second. We actually do suffer from similar issues, and the violation of sexual sovereignty is done in a way where the healing, like in the secret society, is very blunt. If they speak about the secrets, which basically is the rape, okay, then they are decapitated. And even the I talked about the MDMA and the drug use, but also the altered state of consciousness that are both used for manifestation, but they are used in a way where they would always intermix something that would be used in extortion calls, and they would make the internal experience look okay. Okay, when one of the gnosis that I went to when I spoke about it in meditation was the meditation of how would, I'm sorry, the offender feel inside, where they would they would, and I'm not saying it's true to every case, but they were putting the offender in a situation where it seemed like the most natural thing, and they would feel healed, loved, and that naturalness of what seems to be the closest to unconditional love, juxtaposed with the horrific actions, would be a part of why people like, let's say, Ehud Barak would say, yeah, I slept with the 12, 13 years old. I don't think that that's wrong. Of course it is wrong. You slept with a minor, you basically raped a person, and also it would confront them with the fact that they were raped. One doesn't get to tend to the topic of abolishing expandable children, ritual abuse, child abuse, pedophilia, without, and the occult related to that, without being put in the experience in meditation of, wait a second, that's what that person, that's what the offender could have internally felt. And I know that because every single person that masters some skill or that gets into a breakthrough, okay, they will be finding how should I say that, they will be um, people would want to use their skill. Okay, so they definitely have had attempts where I knew I have to be the humblest of humbles when I tend to the inhumane of inhumanities, because I knew that they want, each and every one of us that wants to have not just a legacy but an innate soul expression and tapping into our self-fulfillment, to be enmeshed in those type of extortion cults to the level that they can get, and to that level they would be able to trust us to do what they want, which is antithetical to what is life and to the very essence of why we want what we want. And so sexual sovereignty here is not only the security level of negating political assassination, negating extortion calls, and so on and so forth, and this is why it's so difficult. Okay, it's done, those type of violations are done to supposedly consolidate wealth in a way where everybody is trapped, soul trapped. But that doesn't bring peace. It brings perpetual war within and outside. Because even the peace is war, because the peace was made about that person, I'm sorry, raping that child, feeling elated that child may or may not have survived. And that appeasement was done to consolidate the wealth so that there can be a business agreement. And that's old money. And yet, even maintaining relationships, um, one of the things I watched the last video of Albina about how to be a spouse to a business person. Now, of course, it's also businesswoman. Okay, we can't. What you have to be a spouse to a business person, you need to be a business person, man or woman. Even to be a spouse to a businesswoman, You need to be a businessman because there are certain things that you need to understand. Okay, my previous video tackled the topic of the ritual of energy harvesting and how that affects wealth consolidation in the family, the legacy, the intergenerational wealth, and the path, the journey of accumulating wealth and consolidating marriage. And this is why I'm so happy to be tending to sexual sovereignty single, because most people don't have this privilege. Okay, I have a lot of money, but but I do have a privilege where I tend to sexual sovereignty single, because none of these advices of how to maintain a happy marriage and maintain the wealth even when the wealth, and really watch that video, because this is a very real thing. Okay, when we talk about wealth, sometimes there is money, sometimes there isn't money, and that includes assets. Okay, and even when there is money, it's reinvested, so it's not like there is cash flow, there is investment. And one of the things that helped me a lot is me viewing my own expenses as investments. Where do I invest my energy? And it may be very weird choices to people around me, but they don't have to make sense to people around me. They have to make sense to me. And this is a part of sexual sovereignty, because violation of sexual sovereignty also causes anomalies in expenses that are trying to regain the sexual sovereignty. Even for people that spend it on, let's say, drugs, we have to take into account that the drugs used by the extortion cults are used also in healing, particularly MDMA, psilocybin. And MDMA can make a person feel comfortable with raping a child as much as it can make a person feel able to heal and recover from being ritually abused. And I'm not going to get into the details, but this is not just rape. It's way more than that. And it's, I went through that in the astral, and that it took me, I think, almost half a decade to understand what did I go through. And it's very likely that it's not impossible that some of the charts that I covered were involved in that, in raping me, basically. And it's not even impossible that they didn't even know that, because they were raped and there was a third party taking their. But I did not see faces. Some other people do. So, and the fact that I did not see faces, okay, it plays into a lot of the trajectory. But here the issue is that the recovery from sexual boundary violation is risking death. And the sexual boundary violation was risking death because the person could have committed suicide, they could have been murdered, and it could have been sacrificed. Not only that, the abnormalities of the genitals, because of the ritual, because of the cloning, they create another layer of shame and challenge to meet sexual sovereignty and erotic needs in a way that is adaptable and safe. Okay, so there would also be the issue of the secret that the genitals not looking, okay, in a way that they would look outside of, let's say, cloning lineages, or certain indigenous societies, or societies where the religion involves certain mutilation of the genitalia. And I call it genitalia mutilation. There's no other way to call that. There's nothing that can justify that. Okay? The entire world is going colonialism around that, to be very honest. Okay? Jews were persecuted for centuries around that. Also Muslims. Okay? And even the rabbinical institutions, I was told the rabbinical no, that it's not, it's a pagan thing, and they're just afraid that the people will not accept them, and that the people are not ready, so to speak, to meet the divine, divinely. okay, without genital mutilation, and without ritual sacrifice. It's a theosophical evolution, but there's also a world consolidation and trauma component to that, that even to the level of the rabbinical and the clergy are not always fully acquainted or fully aware, because they themselves were, okay, ritually abused beyond the genital mutilation even. And this is where this topic gets another layer of intricacy, um, and it's a part of what's done. The forced gender surgeries are done on people under the guise sometimes that they will later have to advocate for supposedly gender affirming care, where it was not at all. Okay, and they can't say it because they fear their lives. So um, this is where all of those topics are basically setting everyone up to be exposed at times where at times that are changing, and it keeps everything in a constant change, crisis, opportunity, but never fruition, sovereignty, and the stability that is not stagnant. And the stability that is not stagnant, particularly with Uranus and Taurus, um, is about that sexual sovereignty being honored. Because the soul will always want. And one of the episodes that really, I saw it on myself, because a lot of you know, okay, a lot of you know, particularly those who read energy, a lot of you know. People cannot. I think that a good energy reader, a person who's reading energy correctly, cannot sense me without knowing. Okay, and some of you maybe know even more than I know of what I've been through. And this is where, how should I say that? Oh, Chiron is 22ing. Chiron has entered the 22 degrees. Oh my god. People are like, why are you excited about it? It's the wound around assassination. It's everything that I'm talking about. And this is also, when I talk about it, it also brings out the amount of emotions, because it's life or death, because it's kind of like everybody met that wound. There is also, it's the wound around life, but it's also life. It's also approximation of life, where everybody knows that that's the thing that will change everything. If we're talking about bridging the gap from the wealthy to the not wealthy, if we're talking about how will we get the people that can afford to pay interested, and then use that to fund what people cannot afford to pay, it's all about re-tapping into sexual sovereignty and breaking the walls of the ghettos, the physical, the etherical, the spiritual, the economical, for all of us, because for the elite, it's like everybody knows that that's the thing. Everybody knows. They don't know how to get there. There's a shit ton of things. Like everybody knows that that's the thing, and it's the unseen, because nobody pities a person with several mentions or several lineages, and most of these people don't even hear about, because invisibility is power. Oh, I got mail. So I'm so excited about Karen being in 22. Karen was in 22 when I began to tend to political assassination prevention. Um, and yes, there are many things where, yeah, I don't know, I can't even. it's like everybody knows that that's the thing, and and it's the breaking of the walls of the ghetto, and this is the sole inspiration to bridging the gap, and it's the thing that people cannot even talk about it with their own soul sometimes, because first of all, mind reading is not how should I say that, it's a very real reality, okay. It's a very real reality, and this is where the communion of people, and also the timelines of what people had to do to one another, are very real reality. Okay, a lot of the people I have encountered, and the fact that I had, because of my grandfather, from my, I think both I think all my grandfathers, um, but my grandfather that came from Sarny, um, which now I think, I don't know, Ukraine, Russia, Poland. We're getting into that timeline again. but um, but when he came, he basically was from the people that escaped the ghetto. And for me, it was very obvious when people like Annika Lucas were talking about ritual abuse. It was very obvious, and I think only a few days was the real evolutionary exposure. I'm not going to say too much because these people are still afraid to, like, it's not only that they're afraid to be assassinated, they have so much threats, but it's like, it's so much like their voice in that discourse is so missing, like it's so needed. um, and and there is still the fear, and here's the thing, is the people that nobody could silence them about anything, but that's the thing, it's kind of like, hey, that voice is needed, and a lot of them even had to traffic me. Okay, that was, this is the reality, and because I knew it's the Holocaust timeline, and that's what people had to do to one another in the ghettos and in the Holocaust, and I knew that we need to break the walls of the ghetto, because the trafficking is done with rape and so on and so forth. This is a lethal thing, and that it's used to assassin. So, and yet the soul, which I think is, everybody can sense, but everybody's been watching me in last couple of years, can sense that the soul perpetually, and please watch episode 9 by Annika Lucas with Alandra, because he was supposed to be an Epstein, and the soul keeps breaking the cage that they try to put it in. And I see it from within, and I see it from outside, and there are many things that I really want to say, but I really want the person to say that, and the person is still within that cage where they're both extorted by and afraid to lose their head over that. And here's the thing, it's always the people that could not be silenced that thing, and I'm like, their voice, they're telling their story is so missing here, and you see almost how the soul wants to break free of that. As it is the entire story of the 20 years for some people of jail-like conditions and assassination threats, and having to be affiliated with being trafficker, okay, okay, and this is, you know, and this is the soul aspiration to collapse the structures, the ghetto-like structures, while we are, in a timeline where there was a threat to build digital jails under the guise of 15-minute cities and digital, like after war, everybody actually has agoraphobia and claustrophobia, the last thing that fits is skyscrapers, okay, or bunkers. No, seriously. Maybe there are some introverts with the stellium in the 12th house, kind of like, give me a bunker, I'm good. I'm like, for 70 years you're good? Are you sure about that? And everybody knows that there's more to life than being a survivor of, and there's more to life than having the image of changing the world without actually doing that, rather than perpetuating the same old. And you know what, particularly for the cloned people, because it's supposed to be the clone of the dead. It's supposed to be like, hey, you lived that life before. Something wants to break through the series of cloning. Vogue. Because something wants to live. And there's no immortality in rape. The immortality is in life itself. The moment, the time transcending moment is the presence of the moment itself. Like, it's not news. And that the people make people take oaths that don't even have, you take a child, torture the things that I don't even want to repeat, and they're gonna be out there. People are gonna know. And then at 9 years old, 12 years old, you put them through a series of tests that they have to prove that they want it, so they're convinced that this was their choice and they really wanted that. And it's the people that don't bend their knees to anything, but they're convinced that they want it to be there, and because of that, how intense the torture, the rape, the soul deprivation was. They thought that this is their nature. And that was the goal. This was to change the nature of nature. And through that, the soul is so unperishable that through layers of extinction, it still preserves, whether it was cloning or the rituals that they done, or the rituals that they done to make people think that this is their nature and this is what they want. And this is something that is unprecedented, but also ancient. And this is why when I talk about sexual sovereignty in spirit and in matter, I talk about it as the essence of everything. No, you will not have a controversy-free, now Uranus is about to go on the Venus of Melania Trump, and the midheaven of Donald Trump. You will not have a controversy-free marriage. Even if you are a businesswoman in the right of yourself, even if you are always standing by your husband, and never humiliating him in public and so on and so forth, like, hey, that thing's gonna pop once in 84 years. And when you're in a bed says it's currency time, it's sexual sovereignty time, they're gonna know. And this is where and it's affecting both the elite and the people. A lot of Americans are now escaping the United States. My very, very, very dark Holocaust joke about that, okay? And I'm allowed to have Holocaust jokes as a Holocaust lineage. Americans are escaping their investments. Classified projects. Um, and so think about the Israelis that are invested in surveillance. Um, can't go to Thailand. Can't go to Thailand. Can't go to Thailand. Can't go there either. I know it looks like egg filled, but they'll get you there too. it, is. It looks like a way to make money. And the core issue is sexual sovereignty. Because with sexual sovereignty, there's an essence of truth and embodiment. Okay? And as a person is telling you that gnosis from a place where, you've seen the charts I covered, okay? I remember one of the things that came up, I remember when I first did Mark Ruda's chart, so that somebody will not feel this included. Aries, I don't know. But the first thing, I saw no other astrologer did that chart. And there was one astrologer that did it like all the praise and so on. It's like almost praise the fear. And I'm like, what happens? Falcon, get a reading. And of course, I would be the person to do that because I have the ascendant squash between that Chiron and Saturn on that second Saturn return, and he has a solar return on the freaking, Saturn Neptune, which is also Valentine's Day, the conjunction in 0 degree Aries, and just seeing the fact that like, hey, nobody in Italy, like this is one of the most prominent figures in the coming years. Nobody's doing that. Nobody's talking about that chart. Why is nobody talking about that chart? And the decision was like, yeah, of course I'm going to talk. I'm going to give a reading. The good thing, the bad thing, the challenging thing. It's an interesting chart. And so, and let me tell you that if not for these trafficking cults, I'd be interviewing several of the people. That was scheduled, that was planned, but I know that sexual sovereignty is the number one value for success that I'm actually happy with, for any kind of relationship that is actually happy, thriving, for any kind of wealth and success. Okay, sexual sovereignty it's the basis. And this is connecting to my previous video where I said everything's not aligned with sexual sovereignty. That would be the time to transmute. And this is where the success that is actually successful, the thing that we're actually genuinely and authentically happy with, it is a lot. It's tending to a lot. It's tending to what we orgasm on. It's tending to deprogramming things that, you see, Bilderberg and Belzen, they have identified that people vote, but the people vote on their orgasm, okay? So they basically build a web of people that control one another's ability to come, which is very funny. I'm not gonna say no names now, but I ran into, like, when I'm doing a chart, when I'm getting the calling to do a chart, then basically I would look also like, at articles about that person, like who is that person and so on. And then there was one of the things I'm reading, and I was like, there was a command come. And I'm like, I was not in it with these people because to me sexual sovereignty is important. And It's not that to them not. It's just they were ritually abused. So, but it was kind of like they control. Like there's a thing of they're controlling one another's orgasm even. And those of you that can, like, sometimes I would even see that, and the interactions, it would be so funny. There's another layer of erotic interpretation that you just see when you see it. There's, that. I'm not gonna say about the things that are. It's not about something that's verbal. Okay. But here is the thing. Because it's based on rape. Because the initial. Okay, the initiation of that was based on rape. Is not tapping to, and that's the Bildenbergen-Belsen. I'm sorry, it has to be Bildenbergen-Belsen from now on. Chiron relates to, together with the ruler Saturn, that's together with Lilith, and now Pluto is Pluto is squaring, um, because they've built the entire sexual energy transmutation on rape, and it's like that is so undermining and antithetical of freedom, actual orgasm. And people wouldn't know that because they would feel elated and excited, but it has to do with, you know, with stress and terror. And it's misplaced arousal. And this is where, it's an entire sector of billionaires that never actually had the real thing. But this is something that is so innate to actually having a satisfying life. Not going from one drug to another. Not. Okay. Now, I know that there are shit ton of harm to the nervous system that was done. And the mind is, the mind can, and the nervous system can. It's not recovery. It's actually because there wasn't even something to be formed with to begin with. It's aligning with actual sovereign fulfillment. Because it's not reforming, it is forming. And to each and every person is going to be discovery of their own self in their own, you know, um, because it's not just about being a survivor that has to, I don't know, go about living somehow, and it's not just about or having everything but having nothing. And that's what I mean when I talk about the Cartesian division. It's a philosophy of the consciousness that was conceived in trauma. It's literally everything in the world that we know not until we know sexual sovereignty. And that is why it's so important. It's not about morals. It's not about, sin. It's not about trickery. It's not about intelligence. Because, hey, look at Finland. Finland had to stand to Russia. And what did they do after the Second World War? Because they worked with the Nazis before, then they had to stand to Europe as well. And what did they do? They began to stop castrating people. I know that it's still going on, but they began to look at schizophrenia as information that the person has as a testimony, and they can't say it, but that's the intelligence advantage that Finland has over the world. Okay, housing first, independent of ability to work, and to believe the patient, and to stop, the attacks on them, is basically also an intelligence advantage, because people were using sexual violation in intelligence because people get dissociated when they raped. Okay, and there's a person that they tried to get me. A lot of people told me, "Oh, you're not supposed to." I received a lot. You were not supposed to remember. This is why people talk about remembrance. Okay, even people like M. Spiracy or Gigi Young. Okay, talking about remembrance. It's remembrance of the soul before ritual abuse, which was in essence the violation of life energy, not just through rape, through anything that would affect the sexual energy, which is life energy, the energy of a person. And that plays into the identity. And of course, this is also how political assassinations are created, and I talked about that. So it's an entire world needing to break the illegal oath of silence. And that's what, now with the moon along Sedna, okay, that plays into the minerals in our food. Okay, because the policies that polluted the ecosystem were created upon these rituals, where the children were, okay, going through that. Yes, Black Moon Lilith is applying to oppose Uranus. And we also understand that we had the attempt to access, here is Midheaven with Spica, the attempt to access the talents, the design, the legacies through the fabric of the Swiss cheese, which is basically the soul that's going through rape, and still build legacies and still build things. And it has always coincided with the programming of rape and trying to manage other people's sexual energy nefariously. Or some, okay, or not nefariously, but it's always coincided with that. Because it's happened in such early levels of infancy, then the recovery into sovereignty is very, very intricate. Um, yeah. And the holding of these contradictions is probably going to be more and more apparent towards the full moon today. Okay, because this is also connecting to the relation of, I received previously the Verrocchio and the Vici, okay, and the patronage and the dependent and the, I'm sorry, sexual bond, the rapey. People call it incestuous, but it's something that is both that, and it's also, the it's torment of the soul. Um, and that is something that entire creation was enmeshed with. So people, even the myth, that people aspire to the myth. Trudy Verstegen addressed that today in the Je t'aime song. And when you listen to the lyrics of the Je t'aime song, or Oui Je t'aime, it sounds so erotic, but it's kind of like, um, and actually, it, it's personal to me because one of the people that I was dating was bringing that song up, and I'm like, why don't we even have music that is actually music, erotic that is actually eroticism, love that is actually loving. And I remember at that time I was looking at Marilyn Monroe as well, and I was like, as a naive person, I'm like, wasn't she supposed to be a sex symbol? Why is she unhappy? because I was hearing her voice. It was so bitter and so on. I was like, what is happening here? What the heck is happening? Why couldn't she connect with her sexuality in a safe way? And I was soon to find out, because I'd undergone severe ritual abuse in 2007 at the time of the kidnapping of Madeleine, and I'm probably not the only one. And because it happened in the astral, there was no nothing, okay. And that would not be the first time that I would undergo um, something horrific that I went through in 2019, as I basically set boundaries to a non-sovereign supposed therapy. Um, and this is why I talked about, MK Ultra, which is also MK often. Um, and those things are to do, with real estate and wealth consolidation, and I even talked about the fact that in those circuits, within, one has to be gay. Outside, they would be murdered for being gay. And because it's so ritualistic, then a person doesn't, I have Chiron in the sign of Gemini, which is also to do with gender. And I don't even know certain things because I have to tap into my sexual sovereignty fully to know what my actual gender expression is, what is and what is ritual, and to hold the space for many possibilities, because it will probably accompany from me for the upcoming decade, um, because a lot of what we even think is gay or straight is ritual. And when people can't tap into their sexual sovereignty, they can't tap into their gender expression. And when people can't have the space to hold, whether it's a gender expression, anomalies in the genitalia, or whatnot, um, then um, then they can't basically tap into their sexual sovereignty, because there is an identity that they will be murdered for having. So, and also, when it comes to policies, they would extort the people. A part of the ritual is to extort the people to make the policy that is the least effective for the person. I'm getting North Korea. So this is something to do with, okay, that they would. I just think about when I did chart of Kim Jong Un, okay, and I was really surprised, because there was smuggled satellite from North Korea, and he was playing the main character of MASH, and he loved the United States. He loved to smoke cigars. He loves to joke around. He loves to drink. And I'm like, that doesn't sound like a dictator that wants to keep everybody. There's something here. And um, um, and nobody wants to be in a situation where everybody have to fake it for them that they're happy for the leader, or it's kind of like all the big things in the world, but none of them is actually real, in the sense that a lot of these supposedly elated people are faking it because they're terrified. And maybe that person was growing into that, or they maybe they ideated that because it was in their lineage. I don't know, but that was a part of the thing that came up. I saw it in my countries, but definitely there is an extortion to, if a leader is, let's just say, you know yes, that there would be trying to bind them to traditional family roles or something like that. Um, it's because of the trafficking as well, but it's not just the trafficking. It's a part of the ritual of putting the people to do the